Humans hate change, and that's just not true. What did you have for lunch today, Shu?
Oh, I had a slice of pizza.
What did you have for lunch today?
Kebabs.
I had a wrap. We love change. There will never be anything that replaces the people on shop floors. What will replace people on shop floors are people who learn how to use AI, learn how to use automation, learn how to use these digital tools. My advice to anybody is to lead change with empathy. You don't know what somebody else is going through. Don't dictate change. Invite them to the table, help them author it. No change project is easy, but it will make it easier if your team supports you in the efforts rather than fighting you.
Hello everybody and welcome to Practitioners Unplugged podcast, where we dive into the real world stories and strategies of manufacturing digital transformation. Join us as we hear from thought leaders and innovators who are driving the change and shaping the industry of Industry 4.0. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the future of manufacturing, this podcast is for you. Coming to you live from Automate for another episode. We focused a lot on technology, and here at Automate, the highlight is AI and robotics. But one of the things that we see constantly missing in digital transformation, and one of the main reasons for failure, is around the topic of change management, or the human aspect of that. So how are we going to focus on the human aspect of that between leadership, between the worker of the future? And to help us have that conversation, we're joined by Jim Mayer, who's a passionate leader. Listening to him talk and getting to know him after the last couple of minutes, really passionate about the topic. He has about 25 years of experience dealing with this, and he's really here to help us focus on the cultural aspect of that. So Jim, welcome to the podcast, and do you want to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, talk about what you're passionate about?
Sure, you did a great job though, Dante.
I
I mean, for however many episodes you guys are in, I was fumbling by that stage, so you are ahead of the game. Well done. Thanks for having me, both of you guys. This is an honor to be at such a really cool show and talking to you guys. And got to interview some of your teammates this morning, which was a lot of fun. I've been in the industry, like you said, Dante, for about 25 years. Started out in industrial distribution, working for Fastenal. I was a carpenter, actually, before I got into distribution. I was selling construction supplies for Fastenal. And I walked into my first machine shop, and it took me back to shop class from high school, and I felt home. I was surrounded by the people that I knew, that I loved, that I could vibe with, right? Yeah. And so I changed my strategy, started only calling on machine shops. It was a good career with them. Went to Keyence, sold factory automation supplies, sold go-no-go sensors for Keyence for a couple of years. Ended up back in the industrial distribution space with MSC. From there, really wanted to spread my wings, learn more about the industry as a whole, the problems that it was facing. So I went and worked for the NTMA, the National Tooling and Machining Association, for a couple of years, advocating for the machine shops in this country that are members of that trade association. After that, went and worked for Big Kaiser, which is now Big Daishowa, then was Big Kaiser. And in 2022, went out on my own, started my company, which started as a company called TCO Strategies, Total Cost of Ownership Strategies. When I realized how much people in this industry hate two words, which are culture and consultant, I had to change the name of my company to eliminate some of the misconceptions and reframe myself as more of a resource provider than a consultant. I didn't want people to judge or feel like I was walking in the door judging them on their culture. So started my podcast in 23, which became quickly more popular than my consulting business. And in 24, launched a YouTube channel, and now I create really cool content for the industry, focused on the humans of the industry. People get to tell their stories on the Manufacturing Connector. I talk with again, great brands like Schneider, and understand more how the technology, the tools out there impact the humans of the industry.
Yeah, that's great. So at what point did you side with the way the industry is evolving, everybody's chancing AI and technology and robotics, you're like, hey, I want to focus on the human, because apparently all the humans right now are like, hey, we're going to be replaced.
Right.
So at what point did you just say, this is the right shift, and what kind of led you to follow that passion?
Yeah, good question. So in that journey of different companies I worked for, I went back to school. Started out with an undergrad, started my undergrad degree at 30 years old, because when I was younger, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grow up. Still don't really know what I want to be, but I cosplay as this. And then rolled that quickly into an MBA. And my capstone project for my MBA was a talent management and employee engagement system or framework for deskless employees, for manufacturers, for industrial companies. And through the course of conducting, I've done over 300 of those at this point, employee engagement surveys and assessments. One thing that kept popping up was the employees of the companies that I work with don't feel they have the right technology to do their jobs, right? Even though owners come to trade shows, and no offense to A3 and Automate or IMTS or any of the other trade shows that are out there, owners go to these trade shows and they find really cool technology that they think solves the problem that their employees are facing, or that their production lines are facing, or whatever that may be. They go home and they say, all right, I bought this, implement it. And they don't take the time to ask their employees if it's something that they actually want or actually need, if it's a right solution, and they don't connect the dots on why it's important for certain end results that they're trying to achieve. So we end up with these really cool technologies in these shops that owners are spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and they're sitting under dust tarps. I was just in a shop last week that bought a tool presetter in 2020 to measure the height, width, and diameter and run out of cutting tools. It has sat under a dust tarp in the corner of their tool crib for 5 years now. That's a lot of money to be a paperweight, right? Yeah. And we see that all the time. So my passion for the people has always been there. What I had to learn was the technology, and how the intersection of technology and the humans really is what powers this industry.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. We've had this concept of asset performance management for 15 years, and we're not talking about the human.
Right.
Right? So it's something that is structured, I can measure it, but maybe, we avoid the human side of asset performance management because it's a little fuzzy, not quite clear what to do with it.
It's scary.
It's scary. Yeah, I think some of the uncertainty is scary.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, your inner engineer probably appreciates the fuzziness of it,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And then to make matters, let's say, more challenging, a human asset isn't really considered an asset on the, on the balance sheet. It's a cost item.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So it is interesting when you look at this and you go, people say, well, my people are my most important asset, but from a financial perspective, that's not necessarily the case, right? There are some incongruencies.
Absolutely,
right?
and I'll take it even a step further.
Yeah.
When we measure the ROI of people, we measure turnover. We don't measure necessarily retention, right? So we measure when they leave. We don't measure when they stay, right? And so that's the difference between asset management and the human side, the human assets, is we don't measure technology assets when they leave, when they go into obsolescence, right? We measure their ROI currently on the shop floor every day.
Yeah.
Whereas the humans, we measure turnover. We measure when they leave. It's completely different. But I think it's because it's scary for owners. The scary part for a lot of industrial organizations is they don't know how to measure soft skills. They don't know how to measure their culture. They don't know how to measure employee engagement in a positive way that shows an ROI that's long term, right? They know how to measure the ROI of a machine tool or a cutting tool or a tool presetter. That's tangible. That's something that they can sit back and say, I know exactly how much this cost. I know its depreciation. I know the production I get from it, etc. They don't necessarily know how to quantify empathy. They don't know how to quantify communication skills. They don't know how to quantify those things. So that makes it scarier for them in this engineering world when people can't quantify things.
Well, and I think right now it's a good time, because if you look at the proverbial white collar blue collar split, when automation was eliminating the blue collar jobs, the white collar people didn't care. But now that AI has come in, we are all in the same boat, right?
Yeah.
And I've alluded to this analogy of, at the end of the day, we get paid for using our minds and our muscles.
Yeah.
And when you look around us, there's a lot of automation that's replacing the muscles, and some of these muscles don't get tired, don't get bored, are more precise. So it is a little daunting to see this this march of industrial progress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same let's say level of fear and apprehension when we think of AI coming for the paper-based jobs.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think that AI, and I had somebody, this isn't my original thought, somebody way smarter than me told me this, but he said AI isn't going to replace people on shop floors. There will never be anything that replaces the people on shop floors. What will replace people on shop floors are people who learn how to use AI, learn how to use automation, learn how to use these digital tools. That's who will replace other people on the shop floor. You look back to when CNC machines first came out, right? We were working on manual machines, or we had the punch cards or whatever that looked like to program CNC machines. When those first programmable CNC machines came out, the people who wouldn't adopt those either moved to the manual machines or they left the industry, right? It's going to be the same with AI, with robotics, with automation. That's not necessarily going to take jobs in this industry. The people who adopt those technologies will, though.
Correct, and the nature of the job changes.
Absolutely. We're able to upskill, right? And how cool to be part of this industry in a time where the dark, dirty, dangerous aspect of manufacturing isn't necessarily a concern anymore. We can point to a high school kid and say, there is a career path, because if you learn advanced manufacturing skills in high school, if you learn engineering, mechanical engineering in high school, industrial engineering in high school, if you learn those basic principles, you can go into a shop and start as a machinist, then become a programmer, and then become a robotics engineer. And that school pathway, that education pathway, that learning pathway will all be covered as long as you get to this point. And so it's just a really cool time to be in this industry. We get to see this transformation. It's just as long as we go about it the right way.
Yeah, so on that note, let me use a different analogy. So if you look at the world of medicine, you have general practitioners.
Yeah.
And we're having fewer and fewer of them because it's a stressful job.
Yeah.
A lot of medical students go specialize in one or another, right?
Yep.
But when I look at the plant floor of the future, I got to be a little bit of an engineer, a little bit of operations, and a little bit of IT.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I need to be the engineer to tend to the machine. I also need to have a fundamental understanding of the process.
Yeah.
And I also need to manage the data.
Absolutely.
Because one of the there's this whole discussion that's happening around data management. And the big problem in the OT space is like, it's like having a library without librarians, right? And
it's a great analogy, man.
yeah, so
I like
it's like the person, closest to the operation also needs to be a curator of the data. And that's
Sure.
not a job description that's well understood or defined, but
Yeah.
that's, so the question is, as we start to think about this, then who and how do we start to move in that direction?
So I look at some of the new technology that we will start seeing on shop floors in the next 3 to 5 years. And I think one of the best examples of that was at IMTS this last fall in the Oak Ridge National Labs Convergent Manufacturing Cell in the mezzanine area of IMTS. I don't know if you guys were there, if you saw this. It was the coolest thing I have ever seen. You had metrology, you had CNC, you had additive manufacturing, you had quality, you had it all right there in one cell. You had welding, you had everything. Every single process that you could think of was in one cell. And so, exactly to your point, Sri, what we're doing is we're taking these once very specialized roles and we're combining the skill sets into one and saying, we need you to be able to interpret the data instead of we need you to machine this part. Right? Is that what I hear you asking?
Oh, absolutely, because the technology is like an extension of ourselves. It's getting better at certain things, whether it's the physical stuff or because again, if you look at AI, most of AI today is sort of like a very useful information janitor.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that too.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of analogies.
He's got it. He's
got a
one
one-liner for everything.
Yeah. So it has its place.
Yeah.
Because as the volume of data increases, taking care. I think there's some statistic around something like between 30 to 50% of time, a data scientist spends 30 to 50% of their time collecting and cleaning data.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
But that tells you the state of the data that's out there, and some of the challenges that are ahead of us in terms of making AI more, let's say, broadly available.
So I think that person, going back to
Yeah.
your question, I think that person still looks like what we have now, right? That entering the trades now. We the people who are mechanically inclined that want to go into these trades, right? To me, the data side is easier to teach than the passion side, right? When I go into any machine shop, when I go into any fab shop or manufacturing facility, I've never met somebody who walked in and said, I don't want to make good parts today. There's a pride, there's an inherent sense of pride. When I used to build houses, I was telling you my story a little bit earlier. I can still drive by places that I built and annoy my wife and kids by pointing out what exactly I did on each of these buildings, right? But people in these, in skilled trades, in historically blue-collar work, there's a lot of pride that goes into these jobs. It goes into these positions. And so it takes a certain person to say, this is what I want to do with my life. The data side of it, I think, is easier to teach than the passion side.
Well, I want to unpack that a little bit because we do see a lot of proud people out there, and it kind of circles back to something that you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about, hey, we got a new tool, we're going to implement it, but it's almost like you're saying that operator's inferior by putting that tool in there because it's going to do a better job than him. So when we talk about the change aspect of that, right, and when we talk digital transformation in general, we always talked about like the collective intelligence, right? This is a combined strategy with everyone. It's on OT function, it's on IT function. Everybody has to have inputs and come along for the ride. And I was with a customer not too long ago, steal his thunder, but he said they start with this things that suck list, right? And they list it out at the operator level.
Sure.
And then you're kind of building that strategy. One of the other things we talk a lot about data is more like the metrics that we associate on the human. We want to look at your efficiency. We want to look at your throughput, how well you're performing.
Yeah.
So there's some aspect to that, like, oh, I have a target on my back because now I'm being measured in real time. So with all that being said, how do we, one, have them, part of it so the adoption aspect comes in, but two, make it feel like if we are starting to implement metrics, there's a rationale behind that that's not just because we're trying to see if you're good at your job or not.
Right.
So how do you manage that cultural shift? Where does that start? Is that a leadership function? Is that collective? Let's unpack a little bit about what successful implementations look like from a change perspective.
All great topics, and so happy you brought it up. And how long do you have? Because I could talk about this stuff for hours.
At least 8 minutes.
I think we're at like 6 now. Yeah. So to address first, culture it's not just a leadership function, it's an everybody function within a facility. Your leadership sets a tone for what the culture is going to be. Ultimately, leadership is, at its most base, the alignment of values between the organization and the people who work there. So the values that an owner or top-level leadership team, what they throw on the wall, if there's alignment with the people there, whether they're shitty or good values, to me, they could be great to you, right? It's very individualistic. What culture looks like, as far as good and bad, there's no judgment. You can't walk into any place and say, this place is horrible for everybody to work at. You can walk in and say, this is a horrible place for me to work at, right? Because your values don't align. If leadership just puts very vague words on the wall, like our values are accountability and character and commitment, those are very vague words. So there's no true alignment at any given point with anybody on the shop floor because nobody knows exactly what those things mean, right? So to start that, culture is ultimately just that alignment of values, right? The more specific the value, the better alignment you're going to have. When it comes to change, there is a feeling, a thought that humans hate change. We're told this forever. Humans hate change, and that's just not true. The three of us are wearing different clothes right now because we love change. What did you have for lunch today, Shri?
Oh, I had a slice of pizza.
What did you have for lunch today?
Kebabs.
I had a wrap. We love change. We all take vacations. If we hated change, there would be no travel, there would be no fashion, there would be no food and restaurant industry. Humans love change, but we love change that we author, that we have a say in, that we can look at and say, this is what I want change to look like. We want it to be substantial, we want it to be real, and we want to write it, okay? So when we look at the failure, that 70% failure rate in digital transformation efforts in manufacturing, in the industrial space, it's because owners are going to these shows, buying stuff without any input from their employees. They come to these shows, they don't send their employees. The shops that implement technology that they buy at these shows are the ones who either take their employees with them or they send their employees instead of the top level leadership, right? Let them be here to find that. So your client, your customer who does that, worst or biggest things that suck or whatever
things that suck list.
Things that suck list. I love that. I do something very similar with shops that I do on the engagement survey that answer that they have a hard time connecting with the right tools and technology on the shop floor. I do shop floor Shark Tank, where we put teams of humans together and they share interdepartmentally their biggest challenges, and then they have to pick one of those biggest challenges and solve it. And the ownership, when all of those solutions are presented, ownership has to commit to implementing the best solution within 30 days of shop floor Shark Tank. You get real change going that way because you get buy-in. You have the people writing that change, writing what that looks like. Sometimes it's a digital tool, sometimes it's not. Sometimes, I mean, I just did one a couple of weeks ago, or maybe in March, and it was a new part washing sink. That's what the biggest issue was. Cost the shop $150, and those employees now feel like they are involved in the process, right?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. If you solicit ideas from the workforce downstream, you have to close the loop onto that process. Otherwise, they don't feel heard, and then those ideas kind of drive out, right? And I think people want to break up the monotony. That's why it's hard to get people that, stuff boxes and do random things over and over and over again, and that's becoming highly automated. And I think people want to have some say in the way that their job is going to change for the better, worse, or whatever. So all good points.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen really cool palletization robot technology today. But for the guy or woman who runs that cell currently, the lead, the supervisor, the manager, the owner, whatever that person reports to, has to do a good job of saying, this isn't replacing you. What I can do from here is I can train you to be a robot cell manager, a palletizing robot manager or programmer or whatever that looks like. Just have to connect those dots. Lead with that empathy, not the command and control, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So let's say we think of, if you put companies into some buckets, we say there are some that get it. Mm-hmm. They live it, the values.
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'm sorry, but for them, you're just a biological robot, right? And pretty much disposable, replaceable. And then in the middle, let's say they're trying to figure it out. At the end of the day, the business is a money machine.
Yeah.
So in manufacturing, let's say that you're making a product, and it's a low margin product. Economies of scale come in, and I really, in order to survive, I just have to do a lot of automation. But then I might have a different kind of a business where there is really an opportunity for the human asset to really shine and become crucial to competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. Right? So do you see, so in this spectrum, any thoughts on, any observations on, the companies that get it, or how would you categorize them? Anything jump out?
Yeah, I mean, the ones who get it lead with empathy. They lead with human-centric leadership, right? Yeah. The ones that don't get it, they are the antiquated command and control style. Yeah. I did a talk a couple weeks ago. I was at the quality show in Nashville. I gave a talk on how you can embed quality as part of your culture, right? You can build quality into your culture.
Correct.
And I had this guy, if I said he was 80, I would be low. He was an older gentleman.
Yeah.
He had seen some time. And he came up and did that classic old guy thing where he tried to crush my hand, tried to squeeze too hard, pulled me in real close, and told me I had effed everybody who was in the audience by telling them to lead with empathy, lead with human-centric mindset, talk to their employees, empower their employees. He goes, that's not what employees do. They don't respond well to that. You have to hold them down under your thumb. You really effed everybody here. And I said, I'm really sorry to hear you say that. What shop do you own? He said, "Oh, I don't own a shop anymore. My employees bought me out." And I thought that was just like the perfect moment of, yeah, you're right. They probably did, because you probably had 60 to 80% turnover every year.
Yeah.
You know, you guys have been in enough shops. You know the shops as soon as you walk in the door where there's not great leadership. You know as soon as you walk in the door when there's a bad culture. For you, right? But also for the employees that work there, because those employees are looking at their shoes. They're not engaging with visitors, right? Those are the shops where there's writing on the walls because people don't respect the place that they work. Those are the places where there's no recognition anywhere, right? There's a shop in Boston that tends to hire people from other countries. That's how he helps build up his workforce. Is he gets invites on LinkedIn from people from all over the world. He has 19 flags on his wall. Every time he hires somebody from a different country, he puts their flag on the wall. That little step in his day creates such a bond between those employees. That's a healthy place to work, right? So to answer your question, it's the shops that lead with empathy and human-centeredness, they get it. And those are the ones who are you're more likely to see digital transformation efforts succeed in than the command and control.
And is it fair to say that these companies, they also take some pride in the manufacturing, the activity of manufacturing?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of companies, especially, let's say larger portfolio companies, they may think that, let's say, no, my core competence is actually design and,
Yeah.
So maybe it's a little harder to expect that passion for manufacturing, but it seems like there is also a certain archetype of a company that really gets it, passionate about it. It's a human-centric approach to their production operations.
Absolutely. And those companies that are very low volume shops, very high mix, very low volume, that call themselves more of a design shop than a machine shop or a fabrication or a manufacturer. Those are typically shops that have very high turnover rates because they don't celebrate the manufacturing aspect. They don't celebrate the craftspersonship that goes into making the parts that they do make. Even though they may be onesie-twosie things here and there, they don't celebrate that. And it takes that celebration to build that culture, to build that pride within the employees, so that when they do go out to a restaurant or a bar and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do for?" They're excited to talk about it, right? When somebody they're not excited to talk about it. If there's no pride, if there's no celebration of what you do, you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's more on the change adoption side, right?
Yeah.
So once we start to adopt this, how do we encourage people to do? So we have preparation, we have adoption, we have sustaining that, right?
Yeah.
So we got to compartmentalize it in those three areas. We talked a little bit about adoption, bringing people, the preparation, but if a leader's going through something that's totally different, right, where we move this digital transformation thing, and it's not more tactical, where we're going to put this component in this, but it's a completely strategic initiative where we're going real time on our KPI tracking. We want to have people that are dynamic on that so that they know what's affecting their work in real time and they can go. Like, how do you prepare that statement that say we're about to embark on this journey? Like, how does that get communicated?
You have to align the KPIs throughout the organization. So if you're going to measure a machinist on scrap rate, the owner's also measured on scrap rate. If you're going to measure the production floor on OEE, the entire organization's being measured on OEE. It's a team win or it's a team loss. If you start siloing KPIs to a point where individual KPI win and loss dictates performance, of that individual and not the organization as a whole, you're not able to connect the dots on that change project to make it be a sustainable thing. You will never be able to build that into your culture to have change be part of your long-term journey, a sustainable journey as an organization.
Now, one of the other things that I heard is that, okay, let's say we go from calculating OEE manual today, and there's a lot of funny stuff that happens with that, to then automating that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that, I thought I was performing at 98% OEE and I'm now at 70, right? So how does that happen when operations managers or plant managers or regional VPs are measured on that throughput and that stat? Like, is there a resetting of the goalpost? How do you fight that resistance of this isn't right, blah, 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 blah. We didn't have the part, it's not our fault.
People only resist that change in statistic if performance management is treated as an event and not a process. If you're having regular conversations with people about their performance, whether the KPI is OEE or scrap or whatever that looks like, if you're having those conversations as a regular part of your manufacturing process, it will never be a surprise.
Conversation's about to go off the rails again, isn't it?
You don't want to toot your own horn.
I think we're at a crossroads with this conversation.
That was 3 in one visit. I liked it. Well done. So you have to have that cascading KPI. I don't really remember where I was ultimately in
We're talking, yeah, and that's kind of on like we're setting the goalposts and
Yeah.
setting that, and now I think we're progressing more to that adoption phase of it, right? So now we're changing, we're adopting, we're embracing, and I think that's what you're alluding to with that celebration aspect.
Yeah.
So I think you're talking more around, okay, so let's talk more about sustaining, like adoption, sustaining that. So you had mentioned celebrator, but are we celebrating one time? Like, when do we celebrate?
Every
How
time.
do you push every time? Every time what?
Every time there is a win.
Okay.
I don't care how big, how small, you got to celebrate the wins. Are you familiar with the agile methodology, Scrum type methodologies, right,
Yeah.
from the software world? I am a big proponent of manufacturers adopting that kind of mentality, that type of culture within their organization. Take a sprint. Celebrate the wins. If you didn't win overall, but you had small incremental wins, celebrate those small incremental wins, right? Learn from what you didn't win on so you don't repeat those mistakes, but don't beat people up over failures, right? When we start to beat people up over failures, that's also when change fails. We have to allow them to win. We have to allow them to feel like they can make mistakes. It's like parenting, guys. Like if we beat our kids up over making a mistake, they're never going to learn from it. But if we allow them to make that mistake, allow them to connect in their heads, that was a mistake. Here were the consequences from that mistake. I recognize that. I'm aware of that. I won't make that mistake again. They're going to change their behaviors. But if we don't allow that to happen, whether it's employees or kids, we're going to see employees make the same mistakes over and over and over again, and then we're going to have fewer and fewer wins to celebrate. It's this really vicious cycle.
Yeah, so that's that sustaining part, right? So
Yeah.
if the culture starts to break down at that point, and it seems like that culture has to be anchored on small things consistently done produce extraordinary results, right? It's not
Absolutely.
a one-time massive effort where we're going to get massive payback, but it's just that culture of accountability, of continuous improvement, and then that engagement that starts.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, so I'm just going to say absolutely.
Great.
So some of this has been around for a while, right?
Oh.
Because we look at lean and continuous improvement cultures, and it is such a rich
Yeah.
space. And it seems to sort of ebb and flow, like, any thoughts on why, what caused, because I felt like for a while there were more and more companies embracing that and actually living its values,
Yeah.
right?
So part of the problem is leadership development, culture, organizational development is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so there are tides that come and tides that go with disgusting buzzwords and a bunch of BS that really is just surface level crap, right? And so when we see that ebb and flow, it's because the pendulum has swung too far to one side or another, right? There is, just like anything in life, a very good, healthy balance when it comes to accountability, when it comes to performance, when it comes to trust, when it comes to those things that create good cultures overarchingly, right? But, and I'm not disparaging anybody, but you've got the Simon Sinek's, you've got the Jocko Willinks, you've got the Adam Grants, et cetera, that make millions of dollars every year in repackaging leadership concepts from previous generations into a different format that fits this generation, right? I tell people all the time, none of what I teach you in my leadership development courses is revolutionary. What I have been able to do is synthesize it in a way that manufacturers understand, in a way that a machinist will understand as they want to grow up and be a shop floor supervisor or frontline supervisor or whatever that looks like. There's nothing revolutionary about anything that I talk about, which I hope doesn't affect sales. For me, I'm not one of the $1 million recipients of any of this, right? But leadership development, it keeps getting repackaged in different ways, and people talk over each other. If you're looking for a good book, not to plug anybody else's books, there's a great book called Leadership BS. It's by a guy named Jeffrey Pfeffer. And he takes all these leadership gurus and talks about why every single one of their concepts is BS and where it originated, so that you can go back to the original concept and look at it yourself and be like, oh, now it makes sense. Now there's not fluff. Now there's not AI generated X, Y, and Z that goes with it, right? It's just the concrete principle. So read that book if you're interested. It's a good book.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about the change management aspect of that. If I know you're kind of passionate about this, you're doing all these tours around helping people out, but what's your advice for customers that are starting out on something? I mean, we got to wrap it up here because they're going to shut the lights off. But what would you like to leave the audience with as like a key takeaway, or, you know, I mean, you're passionate about this. When does change management come in? Is it part of that strategy? Is it at the forefront? Like, when do they consider this? Because it seems like it's an afterthought. Now we're back stumbling through, how do we get this thing to go? So how would you structure, you know, the change management aspect of any transformation that a company's going through?
I will always say change management needs to be, especially in our industry, right? We evolve constantly. There is not, and we evolve at a greater rate than even the day before, right? Today we evolved faster than we did yesterday. It's compounding. We are accelerating in our evolution in this industry, and it's only going to get more and more digital. It's going to require more and more change. So if you're considering digital transformation, you need to just do it, right? It's not if, it's when you're going to need to change something. My advice to anybody is to lead change with empathy. You don't know what somebody else is going through. Don't dictate change. Invite them to the table, help them author it. From there, it's not going to be easy. No change project is easy, but it will make it easier if your team supports you in the efforts rather than fighting you.
And it also requires you be proactive, because the bad side of it is when you hadn't thought things through, and you're simply thrashing around and reacting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Jim, this conversation's been great, and I definitely
I could keep going, guys.
I know you can, but apparently Automate won't let us go all night. So
yeah, I see a security guard down there.
I know, he's twirling his whistle, right? That's the change you didn't like. But no, I definitely appreciate you joining us. If people want to learn more about the message that you preach and where to find you, where can they go out and look and find some content?
So LinkedIn is a great place to find me. I'm in a giant bathtub of orange ping pong balls on LinkedIn from Spin Chicago. Name is Jim Mayer, again, on LinkedIn. You can also look up themfgconnector.com. It's the website. You can find podcasts, YouTube videos, free resources, the tour, all the things that we get into is all right there on that one page.
All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Practitioners Unplugged. Once again, I'd like to give a special thanks to Jim for helping anchor this impactful message. If you guys like the podcast, keep preaching, right?
Got it, man.
If you guys like the podcast, please like, subscribe. Let us know where you want to go with this, what content you want to see next. And as always, keep practicing, keep innovating. We'll see you next time. Take care.